guest today, if especially for our Pittsburgh fans, streaming live on my Facebook page and LinkedIn page and all these different things, is I believe he is the guy. Is when the Pirates were winning, and when he brought the Pirates back from the disappointments in the 90s once Bonds and Mania left. He restructured and built a huge club. I'm excited to welcome former manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates and Major League Baseball superstar manager Clint Hurdle. Clint, how are you, man? Thanks for stopping by.
Neil, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you.
Clint, you think about that. You really brought the Pirates back to life. It was something where the Pirates were used to just, oh, hey, we just go to PNC Park just to, enjoy the food. It was never about winning. How did you bring that winning attitude into Pittsburgh?
Well, there's many fingerprints on success, Neil. It wasn't just mine. I think I was fortunate. I came in place after, Frank was brought on by Bob and Neil was brought on. Neil brought Kyle Stark on. We started developing some continuity within the the major league system and our farm system. And the first few years were hard. We got off to really good starts, and then we just got beat up the second half of the season. But things were happening. Young players were growing, experience was being garnered. I think sometimes, for whatever reason, a certain voice, a certain message can resonate. And I shared with our group coming in 11 that, we need to be able to talk about winning, even though we haven't won. It's been 18 consecutive losing seasons. We ran it to 20, but you got to believe in something. You need to believe in each other first, and then you got to hold on through the tight times, grow through the hard times. And I do believe there'll be a celebration in our future. And it was the coaching staff. It was the players. It was our opportunity actually in the 13 season when Neil was able to go out and get Burnett. You get Russell Martin, you get some guys with some street cred, and Walker's growing and McCutcheon's growing, and you got Starling Marte coming up. Alvarez had a huge year in 13, but the pitching really epitomized what we became. And then we found an offense that could score a lot of different ways, and defensively we played sound. So we just got better at baseball, I think.
No, I think I absolutely you did, and then the winning attitude came back, and it was such an amazing experience, especially remembering, playing the Cubs, and the whole experience was amazing with the Pittsburgh Pirates. But before that, people might have forgot your career in baseball. You had a very successful career in baseball before even becoming a manager. Talk about your fondest memories with the Kansas City Royals and different things like that.
Well, yeah, it's a lifetime in baseball. This is my 50th year.
50th
And
year. I can't. That's unbelievable.
who
Not
would
many
have
people stay in something for 50 years.
no, and I can remember back in the day as a young player in Kansas City when Whitey would bring in some of his buddies. Herzog would bring in some of his buddies today. He's been in the game 45 years, 50 years, and we'd look at each other and go, gosh, who could do that? Who would ever want to do that? Well, I've become that guy. In Kansas City, it's kind of where it all started for me. Drafted by the Royals up through their farm system, played in the big leagues at a little over 20 years old, in a time when Royals baseball was very exciting. Kauffman Stadium was new. We're playing on turf. It's the AL West. There's good teams. We drew a ton of fans. I think 3 million fans a couple different times. Playing with Brett, playing with Frank White, Amos Otis, Willie Wilson. Gosh, I could go on and on and on. Willie Mays, Aikens, Darrell Porter, and to get to the World Series. So we had a couple playoff opportunities. We got to the series. From there, I went to Cincinnati for 1 year. It wasn't very good. Then I bounced between the Mets and Cardinals the next 5 years, I think, playing in the big leagues. So at the end of the year, probably not what a lot of people expected, and myself included. However, I learned how to be patient. I learned how to be tough. I learned how to persevere. And I think a lot of those lessons learned through my development days, going back to the minor leagues after being big, probably prepared me for being a coach or a manager.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're so right about that because there was a winning attitude. How much did you learn playing with George Brett? Because I think about George in so many ways as the quintessential when you think about the Kansas City Royals.
Well, George was obviously he's a Hall of Fame player, and rightfully so. His preparation and work ethic were second to none. When he came up, he was a good hitter. He became a great hitter. When he came up, he had some gap power. He actually had power. When he came up, he might have been a below average fielder. He became a gold glover. He was a leader through words and probably a leader through actions more than anything else, just by the way he played the game, the way he got out of the box, breaking up a double play, laying out for balls, tough at bats off the best pitchers in the game. So I learned a ton from George watching him. And one of the things I'll remember most about him, when I was in a rough place, we'd usually stand by each other for the national anthem. He tapped me, he goes, "Hey, Clint, let's get 5 hits today." And I go, "Okay, George, we'll get 5 hits." Thinking, yeah, that's great. He'll go, "I'll get 4, you get 1." And just kind of put it in perception for me. Okay, listen, I'm having some fun with this guy. He was a special guy, and he still is a special guy that I can still pick up the phone and make a call to and ask for some guidance or some assistance.
Well, you have so many of those people in so many ways. So let's talk about, what are you doing now? Clint Hurdle is not the kind of guy that goes and promotes a book. I know you, it's based on your career and who you are. You're a man of these words and you go out and play baseball, but you decided to write a book. What made you want to write a book?
I didn't want to write a book. I wanted to co-author a book. I had people reach out to me, Neil, for years after our World Series run in Colorado. "Hey, write a book." Not while I'm in uniform. "Hey, after the time in Pittsburgh, or actually after Colorado, I went to Texas for a year. I was a hitting coach there, and we went to the World Series." So some people there said, "Hey, you've been to the World Series twice. You didn't write a book about the experience." And then the 3 years in Pittsburgh, 13 through 15, when we were a force in the NL Central and PNC Park was a hostile environment for other teams to play in, I had some people in Pittsburgh say, "Hey, you need to write a book about these years." And it just wasn't the right time. Once I decided to take a step back after the 19 season, I had a friend of mine in Texas reach out, Dave Burchett, and said, "Hey, I know you said no to writing a book. How about co-authoring a book?" I go, "Well, what does that consist of?" He goes, "You share all your thoughts. We have conversation. We tape it. You send me notes. And then I'll do all the hard work. I'll write it. We'll do all this." And I go, "Wow, that sounds like a much better offer than writing a book on your own." Well, Dave and I spent 2 years putting together a book, and we could not get the book published as we were contemplating self-publishing or going a different angle. Dave asked me to ask a good friend of mine, John Gordon, who has written 17 bestsellers. John would just read the book. Everybody kept telling us, "Clint, Dave, nobody's going to buy your book. It's 2 old white guys sitting on a porch sharing leadership lessons. It's a very small demographic, right? Very small." And okay, but first you get mad, then you get sad, and then you figure we got to show them, we got to figure something out. Dave asked me to ask John to read the book. John's done tremendous work writing books. He's a gifted speaker. John reads the book and he basically says the same thing. He goes, "Clint, in this industry, you get one shot at writing a book to leave a print." He goes, "This one, the demographic's not big enough." He goes, "You're missing the boat here. You need to write a book." I'm like, "John, come on, I don't want to write a book." He goes, "Here's why you need to write it." And he gave me like 5 reasons. And I said, "Well, here's 5 reasons I don't want to write a book." And he goes, "So you're afraid?" I was like, "No, I'm not afraid." He goes, "Well, then why don't you write a book?" And I go, "Well, here's why I'm not afraid." And he goes, "So really, you're just afraid?" And I go, no. I start thinking, you know what, Neil, I was afraid. Rejection, disappointment, too much work, something I've
Right.
never done before, the unknown. And he goes, "Clint, we've been friends for 14 years. I've got a folder I keep on hurdleisms." I said, "What?" He says, "Hurdleisms, things you've said to me that I've kept and I write down. And you shared them. I've heard you share them with teams. I've heard you share them in the locker room. I've heard you share them in spring training." He goes, "You need to write a book on hurdleisms with all your life experiences." He goes, it'll resonate with young and old, male, female, sport, non-sport." Well, he talked me into it. And finally, I just said, "You know what? I'm going to push the fear out of the boat. I'm going to get in the boat and I'm going to row and I'm going to write a book." And it took me 9 months of writing, probably a month and a half to prepare, 9 months of writing, and then a month and a half at the end to edit, fact check, spell check. It was probably a year's journey. And I learned so much about myself, about the book industry, and then just about people, along the way, because I had to go back and touch base with a lot of the people that I shared these experiences with to make sure my facts were right.
Right. So, I mean, and you think about it, you would be and I'm sure you already are doing this, public speaking, companies and different things like that. You're such a motivator. You know how to, you tell, you're a storyteller, a motivator. Did you learn that? Is this new things you learned about yourself, or you started thinking, I did it in the baseball, but now I can do it in the real world to, corporate, to people that are struggling through hard times and things like that. That's what I see from you, Clint. And you seem very humble, very, willing to share. And that's impressive for somebody that has success you've had.
Well, Neil, in the book Hurdlism, I share one of them is that, there's two kinds of people in this world, those that are humble and those that are about to be. I've been both, and I sure like being the humble guy way more than the guy that needs to be humbled, because I've been that guy way too many times. I
Ditto.
basically had the ego kicked out of me. And after the World Series opportunity, in Colorado, some speaking engagements would come up, and I put together a leadership program, or maybe things that we learned along the way of our journey to how to maybe have success, and how do you define success. Since then, the corporate speaking world has reached out to me. This was going to be my biggest year. I was probably going to do 15 corporate speaking events. And then I got thrown a different detour the other last week. I'm now the hitting coach back with the Rockies. So I've had to hit pause on the speaking. But I've done a bunch of corporate speaking the last 4 years on lessons learned in the dugout that pertain to life. And I'm just trying to share experience. I'm trying to share some hope, and I'm trying to share truth with people that out there that maybe were in some of the tough times I was in, or in some dark places that I've been.
The hitting coach, that's got to be wild, right? Tell us that story, how you got that phone call. Because you're doing so many different things. You're like, okay, I'm going to do the whole corporate speaking gig thing, and then bam, this opportunity came out. Were you ever thinking it was going to happen?
I had put that on the back burner. I learned a long time ago from Kelly McGregor, who was our first president, my president, when I was in Colorado, my first managerial opportunity. He said, Clint, as long as God wants you in that chair, no man can move you out. And when God doesn't want you in that chair, no man can keep you there. Well, Kelly was part of the team that fired me after being there 8 years. I went to Pittsburgh. I was in that seat for 9 years. Started as a hitting coach in the minor leagues with the Rockies. So it's kind of come full cycle in my 50th year. Didn't see it coming. I want to say third week of April, I get a call. I'm going into Fresno to watch our young kids play. I've just spent a week in Spokane watching our young Rocky players play. And they share with me that they feel they needed to make a change, and that I would be the guy they would hope would consider taking the position to lead this young group of hitters back to some normalcy, because right now we're having some big time challenges on the offensive side of the ball. So I had to sit down with my wife, shared with Carla my thoughts. She shared her thoughts with me. I've always had a big love affair with Colorado, just like the huge love affair I have with the people of Pittsburgh. And when people that you love reach out and ask for help, it just plays different on your heart. And these people, the president, the owner, and the general manager reached out to me, and that was enough. You either talk about making a difference, or you go make a difference.
Yeah. I've been trying to book this podcast interview for radio/TV. We'll be on BPTV also in Bethel Park. So will be on television in Bethel Park as well. Just, I have the television show there. It's interesting. I'm trying to get this booked, and your life is completely changed. And I have seen a transformation in 2025. I guess as leaders, we have to be willing to make changes when we least expect, because we're planners. I'm sure both of us are really planning things out. Okay, this is where we're going to go. And then there's this detour, either a difficult detour or a great detour. It says, okay, now I'm going a different direction. What do you tell business owners sometimes and different leaders when they are given a different task that they didn't expect?
Well, I love to read, number one, and I learn from others. I try and maintain a white belt mentality. That's one of the chapters in my book, to be a lifelong learner. My son brought it to my attention when he was going through his karate classes. And truthfully, most people, when confrontation arises, we either open up our hands to receive what it is, learn the lesson, or we put up our fist to fight it. More often than not, we're going to be best served by looking for the lesson within the challenge. There's a lesson there meant to be learned. Yes, it's going to be hard, but we've got to be able to do hard. Yes, it's going to be challenging. We've got to be able to do challenge. We've got to show the people that are working with us and for us what real leadership looks like. Not when all the boxes are being checked, the quarterly numbers are coming in, we're making money. But when a problem arises, usually one person moves and other people follow. You never hear the term a flock of leaders. There goes a
Right.
flock of leaders. No, there goes a leader. There's some leadership. So in our case, this situation specifically, I needed to make sure, first of all, my family's on board. And my wife said, Clint, this is what we've done for a long time. If this is your heart's passion for these people, we'll make it work. We'll make it happen. So number one, the grace my wife showed me was tremendous. Carla's been my biggest fan, my biggest ally. Then to make sure you assess the situation you're walking into, because it's okay to walk into a situation, but do you really know what you're walking into? So then I have to get information and feedback from the people that have already been in that vacuum. And then I get some first thoughts from some people that I trust that were in that firewall or in that situation. And then I use my ears and I use my eyes before I use my mouth too much. Because we have a tendency to run to talking. I need to listen. I need to hear, because when I say something, I want it to have meaning. I just don't want to ramble or verbally vomit on a situation.
Okay. Now, this last question's for my co-host who couldn't make it, Greg Hanna. He always asks this question. It's the most powerful question in the world. I've learned it for so many celebrities. He's asked this question. So, Clint, what is the most important thing in life you've ever learned?
Well, I just used it earlier. There's two kinds of people in this world, those that are humble and those that are about to be. That's the most powerful lesson I've learned.
And that makes a strong leader, because we're going to have problems always as a leader. You're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have your challenges, and you have to be able to keep going, not get sick, not end up in the hospital, not showing up even when the things get the toughest. That's what a leader does. And a leader goes through challenges, has to make hard decisions. I've learned this in my life, not to the magnitude that you have, but I've done that to grow my business and see where I'm going next. And if you can't handle those things, you're not going to be a great leader. You're not going to be able to lead other people.
No, you're so spot on there, Neil. I think one thing you can add to that is that I've always shared, you need to be mentoring somebody on your leadership journey as well, because if you get sick, if you get hit by a car, there has to be a plan B in place, or there needs to be a plan B in place. Because what happens sometimes when the leader is removed, there's about 5 or 6 other people that think they should be the leader. Then there's conversation on who should be the leader, how we're going to lead. There's a lot of confusion. So I've always stressed to the corporate groups I spoke with, or even any situation I've been with in Pittsburgh, shared this with Coonley, shared this with Huntington, shared it back in Colorado. If something happens to me, I need to have a guy in place that you trust to turn to. So it's a turnkey operation. There's not chaos and confusion for 2 weeks after.
All right. Best place to pick up the book, Hurdleisms. Where can they get it?
Amazon.com. It'll be at your house in a couple days.
Appreciate it, Clint. Thanks again for the time.
You're welcome, Neil.
You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.